They said it was impossible. A landlocked nation with limited machines, shrinking budgets, and a people cut off by isolation. Yet in the red soil of Burkina Faso, something unexpected is stirring. 1,000 kilometers of road, not carved by bulldozers or mixers, but by bare hands and bags of earth. For more than 60% of its people, rural life is reality. Fields stretch wide, but the markets remain distant. Children walk hours to reach schools, and the sick wait helplessly for transport to hospitals that feel like another world away. In this fragile geography, roads are not luxury, they are survival. And so, under the leadership of Ibrahim Traoré, a new vision takes root. A vision where each compacted bag of soil becomes a brick in a larger destiny, where the strength of calloused hands can redraw the map of a nation. Stay with us. What comes next is more than just a story. Subscribe and walk with us, because the question now is not whether roads can be built. It is whether the spirit of a people can transform earth into legacy. In recent years, Burkina Faso has faced a cruel paradox. On one side, a nation rich with fertile soil, hardworking farmers, and youthful energy. On the other side, broken roads, collapsing bridges, and vast rural areas cut off from schools, markets, and hospitals. For too long, development was measured in promises, grand projects announced, foreign contractors arriving with machines only to leave behind debts and unfinished works. Enter the Do Nou method, a Japanese technique with a simple translation: soil in bags. At first glance, it looks ordinary, even primitive. But in a nation where heavy machinery is rare and budgets are tighter than rope, this method transforms weakness into strength. The soil itself becomes the building block of progress. Each bag is filled with laterite earth, carefully chosen and moistened, then tamped 20 times with rhythmic force. The result? A compacted brick of earth, uniform, sturdy, ready to be stacked like stones in a wall. Layer upon layer, these bags form the foundation of a road. Covered with gravel or soil, pressed by nothing more than human hands and simple tools, a road emerges. No bulldozers, no rollers, no concrete mixers. Only the sweat of villagers, the patience of youth, and the rhythm of hammers striking 20 times per bag. But this is not just about technique. It is about dignity. In villages where unemployment is a silent disease, where young men and women watch years pass without income, the Do Nou project offers something greater than wages. It offers purpose. They build not only a road, but a path for their own children, their own families, their own future. When a Do Nou project begins, the village changes. Young men carry soil, women fill bags, elders guide with wisdom. The sound of tamping becomes the heartbeat of progress. And as each meter of road is completed, the pride is visible. This is not an anonymous contractor's work. It is their own, their fingerprints pressed into every brick of earth. President Ibrahim Traoré has placed this method at the center of an audacious plan: 1,000 kilometers of rural road. It is not merely an engineering target. It is a social contract. 1,000 kilometers that could connect the farmer's cart to the market, the student's feet to the classroom, the mother's cry to the hospital, and the soldier's boots to the front lines of security. Skeptics say it cannot be done. They point to the fragility of earth, to the limits of human labor, to the storms that wash away hope. But what they overlook is the hidden power of participation. A nation that builds with its own hands is a nation that does not wait, does not beg, does not yield. And so, in Burkina Faso today, a new kind of construction begins. Roads born not of concrete and steel, but of unity and soil. Roads that stretch not only across the land, but into the hearts of a people. But could bags of earth really carry the weight of a nation's future? The vision was bold, but reality struck hard. Burkina Faso's treasury was thin, its machinery scarce, its international lenders cautious. Traditional road projects required bulldozers, rollers, cement plants, machines that came with foreign debts and contracts written in languages most villagers could not read. For many, the dream of 1,000 kilometers of rural roads seemed like a mirage shimmering in the Sahel heat. But then came the shift. The Do Nou method was not just a technique, it was a rebellion against dependency. Where others saw poverty, Traoré saw potential. Where experts spoke of impossibility, villagers answered with calloused hands. It was in the dust of laterite villages that the project reached its emotional peak. The unemployed youth, once dismissed as idle or restless, became the labor force of hope. Day by day, they tamped the bags 20 times each, sweat dripping, rhythm steady, the sound echoing like drums of resilience. Women joined, filling bags and carrying water. Children watched their fathers and mothers build not just roads but destiny. The media within Burkina Faso seized on this narrative. National radio praised the roads of the people, by the people, for the people. Commentators framed it not as poverty's compromise but as sovereignty's assertion. Instead of waiting for foreign contractors who inflated budgets and abandoned projects, villages took charge. Every meter completed was proof that dignity could be built without loans or lectures from abroad. At the peak of emotion, President Ibrahim Traoré himself declared that these roads were more than infrastructure. They were symbols. Each kilometer we build is 1 kilometer less of dependence, he was quoted as saying. It was a moment of defiance, a statement that Burkina Faso would not be defined by its limitations, but by its ingenuity. Still, doubts persisted. International observers whispered about durability, about whether these soil-bagged roads could survive the pounding of lorries, the rains of the Sahel, the weight of time. Critics abroad described it as romanticism, as fragile symbolism. Yet for those who walked on the first completed sections, the meaning was tangible. Mothers reached hospitals faster. Farmers moved goods to markets without losing half their harvest. Children cut their walking time to school. Emotion surged not from statistics but from stories. An old man, seeing the first road stretch from his village to the main highway, remarked, "This is the first time in 50 years that we can reach the market without waiting for dry season." His words carried more weight than reports or spreadsheets. The crescendo of the narrative lay in this paradox. The technique was simple, but the stakes were monumental. This was not merely road building. It was nation building. And yet, as the hope grew, so too did the shadow of the next question. If Burkina Faso could indeed rise on the back of these handmade roads, could the momentum endure? Could dignity forged in soil withstand the storms of politics, finance, and time? Yet as hope rose, another question loomed. How far could this vision truly go? The first kilometers of Do Nou roads were more than just stretches of compacted soil. They were arteries carrying life into the nation's veins. Almost immediately, the effects rippled through Burkina Faso's rural heartlands. Farmers who once watched their produce rot in villages now transported it to markets before it spoiled. Tomatoes, maize, and groundnuts reached stalls fresher, prices stabilized, and families earned a little more dignity with every sale. Merchants, too, found new frontiers. Remote areas, once cut off for half the year, opened to trade. Goods flowed in from soap to salt, and goods flowed out from harvest to handcrafts. Roads that cost a fraction of traditional projects unlocked entire value chains. Children, who had once trudged barefoot for hours to reach schools, now traveled faster, arriving less exhausted and more ready to learn. Mothers carrying infants no longer endured desperate journeys to clinics. Ambulances, even if old and worn, could reach patients where before they had stopped at muddy impasses. For communities that had lived in silence and neglect, these roads became bridges to opportunity. Unemployment, the silent wound of the nation, also found relief. Thousands of young people joined the road projects, earning wages while building a future they could see and touch. What began as temporary income became something greater, a sense of belonging, of ownership. When you lay a road with your own hands, you do not let it crumble. You protect it, repair it, defend it. But the consequences were not only social, they were political. In a land scarred by coups, corruption, and foreign dependence, Do Nou became a declaration of sovereignty. Ibrahim Traoré, unlike leaders who once waited for aid or foreign contractors, pointed to a new model, one where the state provided guidance, training, and modest tools, while citizens themselves became engineers of change. This shift unsettled many. Traditional contractors, those who profited from inflated deals, saw their influence shrink. Foreign critics dismissed the method as unscientific, temporary, unfit for modernization. But to Burkinabe citizens, the symbolism was clear. Their future did not need to be imported. It could be shaped from their own soil. Still, limitations remained. Do Nou roads were not immortal. Heavy lorries threatened to destroy them. Floods could wash them away. Time demanded maintenance. Yet communities that had tasted ownership began organizing maintenance groups, patching damaged sections, proving that resilience was stronger than asphalt's promise of permanence. In this tension between fragility and determination, a deeper truth emerged. The project was not only about roads, but about rewriting the meaning of governance. When the people themselves are stakeholders, the bond between citizen and state strengthens. It is here that the notion of Ibrahim Traoré legacy becomes visible. Not a legacy measured in skyscrapers or highways of steel, but in 1,000 kilometers of humble soil-bagged roads, binding villages together and binding citizens closer to the nation. But as the red dust settled, one question remained. Could this fragile yet powerful legacy inspire not only pride but permanence? Could a path paved with earth withstand the storms of history? The legacy was being written in red earth, but how would the world read it? Beyond the borders of Burkina Faso, the story of Do Nou has been met with a mixture of admiration, skepticism, and quiet unease. African institutions like the African Union and ECOWAS praised the spirit of self-reliance but worried about durability. European observers, used to measuring infrastructure by tons of asphalt and kilometers of concrete, struggled to see the value in roads built by hand. For foreign contractors, this experiment was almost a threat. If a nation could mobilize its own youth and communities to build functional rural roads at a fraction of the cost, what place was left for billion-dollar tenders and inflated budgets? In conference rooms from Paris to Brussels, analysts framed the initiative as admirable but unsustainable. The Sahel, a region plagued by terrorism and instability, relies heavily on mobility. From a strategic perspective, any initiative that improves local transport, no matter how unconventional, also strengthens the capacity of the state to project security into rural zones. American analysts noted that the sight of soldiers moving along community-built roads was both symbolic and strategic. China, with its Grand Belt and road projects across Africa, presented an interesting contrast. While Beijing funded highways with concrete and loans, Burkina Faso's Do Nou roads whispered another model, small, local, cheap, but deeply rooted in community resilience. To some, it looked fragile. To others, it looked like freedom. What stood out most, however, was the question of vision. Ibrahim Traoré was not merely filling gaps in infrastructure. He was sketching a broader horizon, one that could stretch into the middle of the century. In speeches and declarations, his roadmap was clear. Sovereignty was not only political or military, but economic and infrastructural. And in that horizon lay what he called Ibrahim Traoré Vision 2050, a future where Burkina Faso would not be defined by aid dependency, but by the strength of its people's hands. Still, the tension remained. Would the world accept this model as a serious alternative, or dismiss it as a symbol of desperation? Would Burkina Faso's story be celebrated as innovation, or forgotten as a footnote in Africa's struggle for dignity? Would the outside world embrace this vision, or dismiss it as too fragile to last? The Do Nou roads are not the end of the journey. They are the beginning of a path still unfolding. The first kilometers laid by villagers mark a turning point, but the road ahead remains uncertain. Two futures stretch before Burkina Faso. In the first, the momentum continues. Training programs expand, communities grow more skilled, and modest government support ensures steady progress. Farmers double their market access, schools welcome more children, hospitals receive patients on time. In this scenario, Do Nou becomes not just a technique, but a movement, a national tradition of self-reliance, a symbol carried with pride into the African future. If sustained, Burkina Faso could inspire other nations across the continent, proving that innovation need not always come from billion-dollar contracts, but from the soil beneath one's feet. In the second future, the vision falters. Without continuous support, legal frameworks, and maintenance, the roads begin to crumble. Heavy trucks overrun them, rains erode their edges, political instability distracts leaders. The dream of 1,000 kilometers shrinks back into the dust, remembered as a noble experiment that never reached maturity. Between these two futures lies the decisive factor: ownership. If the Burkinabe people continue to see these roads as their own creation, maintained by their own labor and guarded by their own pride, then the spirit will endure. If instead the roads are abandoned to bureaucracy and neglect, the vision may collapse. Ibrahim Traoré has tied his leadership to this path. The world will watch whether he can transform a construction technique into a political philosophy, whether his name will be linked not just to the present, but to the destiny of a nation. For in the end, it is not about roads alone. It is about sovereignty, dignity, and the courage to choose trade over aid, sweat over waiting, hands over hesitation. The red earth has already been lifted. The rhythm of tamping has already echoed. The question is no longer whether Burkina Faso can build roads. It is whether these roads can build Burkina Faso. The road has begun, but where will it truly lead? 1,000 kilometers, not of asphalt, not of concrete, but of red earth pressed by human hands. In Burkina Faso today, every compacted bag tells a story of farmers who no longer lose their harvest to isolation, of mothers who can now reach hospitals in time, of children who step into classrooms with shoes unstained by endless dust. This is where legacy begins, not in monuments of stone, but in roads of soil, not in borrowed machines, but in the sweat of citizens. When history remembers this era, it may not recall every kilometer, every village, every bag tamped 20 times. But it will remember that a people refused to wait, refused to beg, refused to surrender. It is here that Ibrahim Traoré's legacy takes form. A legacy not measured by foreign approval, but by national pride. Twice over, his name may be written in these roads because every meter is both a testimony and a challenge. Will this be remembered as the spark that lit a new model for Africa, or as a dream left half-built? For Traoré himself, the horizon is larger. It is not only about today's kilometers, but tomorrow's decades. In his speeches, he has pointed toward Ibrahim Traoré Vision 2050, a future where sovereignty is not merely spoken, but lived, where infrastructure is not a gift, but a birthright, where the soil of Burkina Faso is not a burden, but a resource. This story, then, is not just Burkina Faso's. It is Africa's. If one small, landlocked nation can rise by transforming bags of soil into roads of dignity, what stops the rest? The message resounds beyond borders. Innovation is not always steel and glass. It can be soil and will, unity and courage. And now the question turns to you, the witness. What do you see in these red roads? A fragile experiment, or the foundation of a new African century? Do not just watch history unfold. Be part of it. Subscribe, share, and let your voice join this journey. Because in the end, the road ahead belongs not only to Burkina Faso, but to all who believe in dignity, sovereignty, and hope.